Picture this: 14 out of 16 World Cup stadiums could exceed levels of heat that medical researchers describe in their own language as dangerous to human performance and human safety during the matches scheduled at those stadiums. 14 out of 16, not 4, not 8, 14 out of 16. The math is so lopsided that the safe stadiums are now the outliers, and the dangerous ones are the rule. That single number is the image. Hold on to it. We are coming back to it again and again, because every part of this story flows out of that one image, and every part of this story flows back into it. The number comes from a peer-reviewed study by Queen's University Belfast, referenced in a Reuters report shared widely on Facebook, and confirmed in coverage by Yahoo Sports and Climate Central. The study examined the 16 host stadiums of the 2026 FIFA World Cup, mapped historical and current temperature data for the months of June and July at those locations, and reached a conclusion that should have stopped the tournament's scheduling discussion in its tracks. 14 of 16 stadiums could exceed dangerous temperature levels during the tournament. Picture what that means at street level. A fan in Kansas City walking from the parking lot to his seat at one of the outdoor venues hosting World Cup matches. The CNN piece on World Cup heat, published the 18th of June, named Kansas City Stadium directly. CNN spoke to medical experts who warned about hydration risks specifically for fans in attendance at outdoor venues. The piece quoted physicians on the conditions a body endures sitting in direct sun in the upper bowl for 90 minutes of competitive football in a city where June afternoons increasingly push into the high 90s and low hundreds of degrees Fahrenheit. That is the image at human scale. A father, his 10-year-old, in the upper deck with a paper cup of water that runs out in 20 minutes and 90 minutes of football in front of them. Now widen the image. Climate Central, in its analysis titled 2026 World Cup Stadiums, Extreme Heat Rising, found that pollution from burning coal, oil, and gas accounts for 49% of all extremely hot June and July days since 1970, on average, across all 2026 host stadiums. 49%, roughly half. The reality being measured is not random. It is the cumulative product of decades of choices, now arriving at the moment a global tournament has to be played in those exact cities. The Yahoo Sports headline summarized the finding in 9 words. Too hot to host. World Cup cities are heating up. 9 words. Decades of climate trend data showing that the cities chosen for 2026 are experiencing far more extreme heat than the last time they hosted any equivalent tournament. Far more. Not slightly more. Far more. Think about that for a second. The same cities chosen for the most expensive World Cup ever organized are also among the cities most exposed to the climate consequences of the last 50 years. The booking decision and the climate decision were made in different rooms by different bodies decades apart, but they meet in the upper bowl of Kansas City Stadium on a Saturday afternoon in the middle of the group stage. That is the image. 14 of 16, dangerous levels, 49% driven by emissions. One stadium named directly by CNN. Players, fans, staff, all inside the same heat. Now bring in the player voice. FIFPRO, the Global Players Union, in coverage referenced by ESPN and quoted in the same Reuters thread, has formally called for FIFA to use covered or domed stadiums for afternoon matches and to reschedule games into evening windows where the heat curve drops. ESPN's headline was direct: World Cup 2026 to use covered stadiums after heat issues. The article confirmed that FIFA, under FIFPRO pressure, had begun shifting some afternoon matches to indoor venues or evening kickoffs. The phrase "under FIFPRO pressure" matters because that pressure was not voluntary. Think about what it took to get FIFA to move. A global players' union, formally organized, publicly stating that the existing schedule risked the welfare of its members. Academic researchers from a major European university publishing peer-reviewed work on the danger. Major broadcasters carrying the story. Only then did the governing body of the sport adjust its kickoff windows. That sequence, pressure first, accommodation second, is the recurring pattern of this tournament in every controversy, from prices to access to climate. A piece in PNC, peer-reviewed work cited in academic databases, found that afternoon kickoff times present the greatest risk of extreme heat to the scheduling of football matches at the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Greatest risk. That is not a journalist's word. That is the conclusion of researchers who studied the data. The reporting in the Reuters Facebook post added that fans attending 2026 matches have far fewer safeguards against the heat than the comparable Qatar tournament, where stadiums were purpose-built with cooling infrastructure. Far fewer safeguards. Read that twice. The 2022 tournament, which faced its own intense criticism for many reasons, was at least built with active cooling. The 2026 tournament inherited stadiums originally designed for American football, baseball, or general sports use, in cities chosen for commercial and political reasons that had little to do with summer afternoon temperatures. Now return to the image. 14 of 16. The picture has now gained detail. A fan in Kansas City, a child beside him, the upper bowl, water gone in 20 minutes. Now add a player on the pitch, in the same heat, running for 90 minutes plus stoppage. Now add the medical staff on the touchline, with cooling vests and hydration protocols that, according to the Queen's University Belfast research, may not be sufficient for the conditions at 14 of the 16 venues. Now take the Steelman, because it deserves a fair hearing. A defender of FIFA would argue this. Heat is part of summer football. The Olympics deal with heat. The Copa America deals with heat. The Asian Cup deals with heat. FIFA cannot relocate cities. FIFA cannot rebuild stadiums. The scheduling has been adjusted under FIFPRO pressure. Evening kickoffs have been added, and covered venues are being prioritized for the hottest matches. The institution would say it is responding within the limits of what is physically possible at scale. That is the strongest defense, and it is not wrong on the constraint side. Here is the counter. Because the constraint was visible in 2018 when the host was selected. The climate data was visible. The Queen's University Belfast research did not appear yesterday. The peer-reviewed PMC paper did not appear yesterday. The Climate Central 49% figure did not appear yesterday. The information was available at the bid stage. FIFA, with that information available, chose this combination of cities. And FIFA, having made that choice, is now responding to the consequences only after FIFPRO and academic researchers force the issue into the public press. That is the gap between proactive governance and reactive scheduling, and the gap is wide. Now hold the image once more, 14 of 16, because the image is also a forecast. It tells you that the cost of summer World Cups in this part of the world is going up, not down. It tells you that future tournaments will have to negotiate climate as an explicit scheduling variable, not an afterthought. It tells you that domed and covered stadiums will become a competitive advantage in future host bids, alongside hotel capacity and transit infrastructure. It tells you that FIFPRO's authority, the players' collective voice, is now central to how the calendar of the sport gets built. And it tells you something deeper. It tells you that football, as a global event, can no longer separate the sport from the planet the sport is played on. The decision to host in Kansas City in June is also a climate decision. The decision to schedule afternoon kickoffs in Houston in July is also a climate decision. The decision to fill an upper bowl with paying fans on a day forecast above 98 degrees Fahrenheit is a moral decision dressed up as a scheduling decision. 14 of 16. That image will follow the sport into every host bid for the next 20 years, because every future bid book will be measured against this number. Every future bid evaluation panel will be asked, will your stadiums exceed dangerous heat thresholds during scheduled matches? Every future federation will have to publish in advance the climate risk profile of its venues. And the answer, the question, the framework itself, traces back to the Queen's University Belfast research, the Climate Central 49% figure, the FIFPRO interventions, and the Reuters reporting that put 14 of 16 into the public lexicon. Now here is the part the early reporting has barely caught up to. The Reuters Facebook post, citing the Queen's University Belfast study, framed the safeguards question in a single sentence that deserves to be repeated. Fans attending 2026 World Cup matches have far fewer safeguards against the heat than at comparable tournaments. Fans, not players, fans. The institutional focus has been on player welfare under FIFPRO pressure, and that focus is correct. But the people in the seats, paying $80 at the floor to over $1,000 at the ceiling, are also inside the same image. The same 14 of 16, the same dangerous levels, the same 49% emission share. and the safeguards for them, according to the research, are thinner. Think about the gap. Players have cooling vests, scheduled hydration breaks under FIFA rules, medical staff steps from the bench, and a powerful global union pressing on their behalf. Fans have a plastic seat, a paper cup, and a ticket that, according to the State Department's own warning attached to the World Cup visa program, is not a guarantee. The asymmetry between the protections on the pitch and the protections in the upper bowl is now part of the public record. That is the image at full resolution. A tournament in summer, in cities increasingly defined by extreme June and July heat, with stadiums originally designed for other sports, with ticket prices that locked out the fans most likely to demand better protection, with a governing body that responded to player union pressure but has not yet matched that response with comparable safeguards for the people in the seats. 14 of 16. That number will not disappear when the tournament ends. It will become the baseline for every future World Cup conversation in the global north. It will become the cited figure in academic literature, in policy papers, in fan group campaigns, in the bid books for 2030 and 2034. The Queen's University Belfast study is, in the most literal sense, a document that has changed the future of where the sport can safely be played in summer. What does the image tell us about the future of football? It tells us that the calendar will move. It tells us that the venues will shrink the list of eligible cities. It tells us that the sport on a hot planet cannot keep pretending the schedule is the same as it was 20 years ago. It tells us that FIFPRO will gain power and that fan groups will demand the same protections. And it tells us that the institution running football will be measured for the next decade by how seriously it learned the lesson printed across 14 of the 16 stadiums at this World Cup. It also tells us something about money. Insurance costs for outdoor summer tournaments in the global north are already climbing, according to industry reporting referenced in The Guardian and the Financial Times. Broadcasters are facing pressure from advertisers nervous about heat-related interruptions during high-value windows. Sponsors, particularly in the beverage and apparel categories, are quietly reviewing their activation plans. None of these adjustments make the news yet. All of them are happening, and all of them flow from the same image, 14 of 16, 14 of 16. The image was always there. The world is finally looking at it. And once you have looked at it, you understand why the next decade of football scheduling will not look like the last one. Summer kickoffs in the global north will become rarer at the elite level. Dome stadiums will become a competitive advantage in bids. FIFPRO will become an explicit signatory in tournament agreements, not a consulted afterthought. And the fan experience, the upper bowl, the family of four with paper cups of water, will finally be part of the institutional risk model rather than an externality the sport pretended did not exist. That is what one number can do. 14 at 16, from a peer-reviewed paper in Belfast to the calendar of the global game. The image, once seen, cannot be unseen. What do you think? Should FIFA mandate climate criteria as a non-negotiable part of every future World Cup bid, or are the constraints too political to enforce? I read everyone. Let me know your view in the comments. If you found this worth your time, a like helps more than you would think. Subscribe if you enjoy thoughtful football coverage. Football at this scale is never just a tournament. It is a moment in time.